Take 5. Hey there folks, how you doing today? Welcome back to the channel. Please bear with any background racket you might hear throughout this production. Trying to keep this short and sweet, we have a Mossberg Maverick 88 shotgun here on the table in front of us. Belongs to the kid down the road. We have it for a very specific reason. We'll cover that in just a moment. First, as I always like to show, safe and empty weapon. There's no ammunition in it. We don't have any ammunition for it out here in our workspace. We're going to keep it that way for this portion of the content. We've featured Mossberg shotguns many times here on this channel. We've featured a Maverick 88 here on the channel. As a matter of fact, the Maverick 88 that we featured on the channel was stripped down and the whole thing was durablued, and I did that for the guy that had loaned it to us for the production. This particular shotgun is not going to get a DuraBlue treatment. There's a reason for that. I'm going to put up a little clip here. All right, now I'm trying to do this justice, but I don't know how much of that you can actually see. This entire surface area is heavily rusted, pitted up. The finish on the shotgun has been destroyed. So you can see that this shotgun has significant rust damage. It's got some major pitting, really bad rust all over all of the steel parts on it. And even if I were to sandblast it and Duracoat it, it's not going to be pretty. There's too much surface damage to the metal. But we're not going to send it back to the kid in this kind of condition either. No, we're going to do something that, while I have mentioned it on the channel before, I've mentioned it in a negative light, and part of that is just me saying that it's not my preferred method. However, you do you. We're going to rattle can this shotgun before we give it back to him. Now, he wanted me to do that, but that's not the reason why he brought it to me. Last time he headed out in the field, he fired around. The plastic hole separated from the case head, got lodged in the barrel. He had to go home. Used a dowel to drive it out of the barrel. Thankfully, he didn't try to shoot another round and blow up the barrel of the shotgun, because that probably would have happened. I have inspected it thoroughly. I see no damage to the shotgun. I think it was just a defective round, and there's no reason why the shotgun's not safe to shoot at this point. But he wanted me to look at it and see what I thought, and so we looked it over with a fine-tooth comb, and moving forward with it, I can't send it back to him like this. The finish is really bad. He asked me specifically if I would do something camouflaged. A 4 or 5 color Duracoat job on this shotgun would easily cost $200 in materials. For a $200 shotgun that's already in pretty rough shape, we're not going to do that. So doing something that I have talked about in the past on here, but we're going to give this shotgun a proper rattle can makeover. And we're going to do it per his request with kind of a camouflage. I've got several colors to work with, matte finish camouflage paint. But before we can do that, we're going to have to get this thing torn apart and get all of this rust off of here. Now, in the interest of price consciousness and tools that every man has easy access to, I'm not going to get my sandblaster out and work this thing over. Rather, I'm just going to scuff it down with some medium grit sandpaper to get most of the rust off and kind of smooth out some of the irregularities in the metal from the pitting. Then we'll get it degreased, prepped, and ready for paint. YouTube has some weird rules about modifying firearms, so I'm not going to show the disassembly or anything, but once we get everything stripped down, I will show you step by step how I'm going to go about doing the camouflage on the shotgun. For those of you that are wondering if I can camouflage a weapon, here you have my Bear Creek upper on a DPMS LR308 lower that we redid here a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago on the channel. The paint still looks really fantastic. While I thoroughly enjoy doing Duracoat, and I think it is for something like this probably the most desirable finish, being realistic, this shotgun just doesn't warrant that kind of investment, nor does he have the ability to pay for it. So we're just going to do this on kind of a budget and factoring in the cost of all the colors of paint and the sandpaper and brake cleaner and everything that we're going to need to make this happen. We're looking at about a $50 investment. Here I have the 6 colors we're going to use for our paint scheme. Additionally, I have some rusty metal primer that I'm going to use to touch some of the spots where the pitting was the worst before we spray our base color. Down here on the knurled portion of the barrel nut, that attaches it to the magazine tube, I'm going to use this wire brush to scrub out those little grooves just to get as much of that loose rust off of there as I can. And here you can see that we've got the majority of the rust off of it now, as well as the majority of the factory finish, to include the aluminum receiver that didn't have any rust, but we scuffed it up to prep it for paint. Now we need to degrease this and dry it out to complete the painting process. Also, be sure once you've degreased your metal to put on a good pair of rubber gloves so that you don't contaminate the surface of the prepped metal with your oily hands. These from Harbor Freight are 9 mil thick. They're very heavy and they're solvent resistant and work real good for when handling paints and chemicals. Now I'm going to go ahead and give the whole shotgun a base coat of flat black. Alright, so now that I have the base black coat on the items, I went ahead and I stuck them in this oven that I made for Cerakote. Now, if you don't have something like this laying around, if the part was small enough, you could put it inside your oven inside the house, although that would stink. Or you could use a hair dryer or a heat gun to kind of heat up the metal with. It's not completely necessary, but since it's a cooler day, I wanted to accelerate the drying so we could get this project done. Let me show you what that looks like here on the inside. Open it up for you. You can see here I've got it, it's a little over 200 degrees in there, and I've got the parts hanging in there, and they already look like they've turned nice and matte black. They were still shiny when I stuck them in there about 5 minutes ago. So I'm going to give them about 20 minutes, and then I'll move on to letting them cool down in the next color. So the hardest part at this point is letting them cool down so I can touch them, because they're still too hot to handle. All right, so here I went ahead and I stuck the barrel back on the receiver. Now you'll notice the black is not completely solid, but it's on there pretty good so that it'll give us a good base coat. We're gonna have 5 or 6 colors on here by the time we're done. Boy, you're noisy. And you can still see quite a bit of the pitting through this first layer of paint as well. Okay, the second color we're going to put on is Army Green, which is quite a bit lighter than the black and will be in high contrast, and that's going to be important for a step that we're going to add a little later on down the line. So when I'm doing a camouflage, I like to have a good hard edge and a soft edge to break up each color. That really kind of helps everything to blend together. We're going to be using some of these leaves that my daughter picked up out of the yard. It's fall and the leaves are coming down, and I figured this would work just as well as cutting something out on a template. The next color we're going to be adding is the Satin Espresso. They were all out of flat brown, so I'm going to test it on there and see how it works. We might wind up omitting this color if I don't like the results. So now that I have a couple of options for a base color laid down, I'm going to use an old plastic net onion bag to lay down a really neat pattern with a different color over them. And then we're going to come back with a stencil and kind of clean it up after we're done. Now, pardon the lighting, but to give you an up-close look at that, it gives us a multicolored background effect, which we will soon be concealing with a little bit more camouflage pattern. This is just an irregular piece of paper that I cut out of an old Target. And the reason I'm using this instead of a leaf this time is to keep from getting overspray on places I don't want it. Having a little bit of a color issue with this can of paint. It's got some irregularities to it. Perhaps I didn't get it shook up well enough. So remix and repeat. Show you here. I'll take this netting, which we're just going to kind of lay down the side over our, this is like the third or fourth pass with a different color. We're just going to kind of come back through. We'll give it that hard edge, the soft edge, and then we have the netting behind it, leaving that nifty kind of irregular pattern. It's a pattern, but it's not. I think it's great. It really does help to break up the overall shape of the weapon, and just gives it that really neat tactical look. I like it anyway. This pattern has served me well in the past, and I think he's going to enjoy it. There's no mistakes, just happy little accidents, to quote Bob Ross. If you see something you don't like when you're going over a pass, you can fix it with the next pass. That's the best part about this technique. So you can see here how going back and forth over it a couple of times allows the shift in the pattern from one color to the next. You can't do just one coat because it makes it look a little bit two-dimensional. If you do a couple of three coats back and forth over, it adds a little bit of depth to it, and it's kind of hard to see it all on camera, but in real life it kind of almost looks like a three-dimensional pattern. All right, welcome back. This isn't the day that we finished this. I've let it cure a little bit now because, you know, it's best you let the paint dry good, cure before you handle it a whole lot. It's good now. It's actually, this morning was the first time, I took that screenshot as I was walking out the door to take the girls to school. First time this season that it was chilly enough that I went back inside and grabbed a light jacket. So glad for that. The heat is finally behind us for the most part. Okay, that being said, look, I realize this is not for everyone, nor is this my preferred method for refinishing a firearm. I think I mentioned that back at the beginning of the video. What this is, let's take it for what it's worth. Let's take it at face value, folks. This was a way, a means for somebody to refinish a damaged firearm for about 50 bucks, okay? Are there better ways? Certainly there are better ways. With Cerakote or with Duracoat, they have filler products which you can use to fill in rust pitting, so on and so forth. There are things you can do to help smooth out the finish. It's expensive. To do either Duracoat or Cerakote on this firearm, my estimation on price would have been about $200. It's a $200 gun new. I mean, it's one thing if you were shooting a single color, and yeah, you could probably do that for about 50 bucks, but with the condition that the metal was in, that would have been a real tall order, even with some of those filler products, and again, that would have ran the price up. So I'm sure some of you have already started banging away about, I don't like it, it looks ridiculous, or whatever. There's going to be those that this isn't your cup of tea. But if you are looking for a cost-effective way to cover a lower-end firearm in camouflage, specifically if that weapon is in less than pristine condition and you just don't want to dump a lot into it, but you want to stop corrosion where it lies, this is a really good way to do it. And while this is not the only pattern there is, it certainly is an interesting option, and it kind of modern. It fits in with some of the modern camouflage schemes that are out there. So I think that for what it is, it turned out really nice. And now you can actually pick this thing up without getting rust all over your hands, which is also very nice. So I'm going to get it back into the proper set of hands, and we do thank him for letting us demonstrate this here on this platform, the refinish of this nice old Mossberg shotgun. I'd love to know what you think about it. Drop us a line down below. Tell us what you think. Until next time, take care. God bless.